My name is Clare Byarugaba. I'm one of the few openly LGBTI rights activists or advocates in Uganda. I currently work with Chapter Four Uganda, which is a legal aid organization focusing on promotion of civil liberties in Uganda. But I specifically work as the Equality and Non-discrimination coordinator. And part of that work involves working to mainstream LGBT rights within the civil liberties and larger human rights movements. But for about 2 years, from 2012 to 2014, I was the co-coordinator of a civil society coalition on human rights and constitutional law, which is a coalition of about 50 organizations that were diverse in nature that came together to fight the anti-homosexuality law. So the anti-homosexuality law started with the tabling of a bill by the then Ndogwa West MP, David Bahati, who happens to be my member of parliament. So in the sense, my involvement in the fight against the anti-homosexuality law was quite personal because in my mind and in my thinking and in my belief, I didn't believe that the people from Kavale and the larger Rushiga area had sent Bahati to fight against homosexuality. There were other bigger issues. So he was the person that tabled the bill. So we fought it from 2009 when it was tabled to 2014 when the president assented it into law. But about a month before that, the Parliament of Uganda passed the bill into law in a very let's call it sneaky. I don't want to say they were strategic. And in a sneaky way, where on 23rd of December, while we had considered that 2013 was another year where we had fought enough to prevent the law from being passed, to 2013 where we felt like it was another year when we had fought the bill from passing into law. But in about 10 minutes, Parliament of Uganda passed anti-homosexuality bill into law, while most of us and the rest of the country had geared up for Christmas holidays. And the then Speaker of Parliament, Kadaga, said it was an offer to Ugandans as a Christmas gift. And the irony of that is that LGBT individuals are Ugandans, and we did not want this as a gift. You know, as a coalition, as I said before, the coalition was one of the first of its kind. I think it was the first time ever, let's say in Africa, where non-LGBT organizations came together with LGBT organizations to fight a law that was heavily dependent on the majority to have it be successful, right? So my understanding is that Parliament had thought this bill would be passed very quickly from when it was introduced in Parliament, because it enjoyed a lot of support, or there was an assumption that the majority of Ugandans supported this bill. So they did not see the coalition and its power and its influence at a national level coming. So we're able to sustain the fight for 5 years. So while the law, which proposed very draconian clauses such as life imprisonment just for being gay, just for being LGBT, identifying as LGBT, you'd be liable to be imprisoned for life. There was another crazy provision that would criminalize promotion of homosexuality. There was another provision that would criminalize individuals that failed to report suspected LGBT individuals. So parents, teachers, doctors, anyone who failed to report a suspected LGBT individual would be liable to imprisonment. So we're able to sustain that fight for 5 years. Parliament passed the law in about 10 minutes, and the president later signed it into law in such a way that I've not seen before. For the first time, I've seen the president call on the media, both international and national, and really posture himself as the, I don't know what he was posturing himself as, because fighting homosexuality shouldn't be something that is the role, the state has no business in private individuals' lives, especially consenting adults. But the way in which he signed it into law showed that it was bigger than just fighting homosexuality. There was a political agenda. There was a leverage for him to show his full support for this law. It was interesting then that, he signed it into law in February, but by August, I think it was August 14th, the law was repealed on a technicality. So you can see that, yes, it was a political move, while in the background, government was kind of grasping at straws to make sure that this law would go away, because of part of it is the work of the coalition and ensuring that there was payback, or that the government felt the consequences of punishing in a legislative and legal way innocent Ugandans who are the LGBT community. I don't want to get too much into the details of the bill, because as an individual who coordinated the coalition for 2 years, it's exhausting just to remember how draconian, how vindictive those clauses were towards innocent Ugandans, towards a community that was already affected by living under such a volatile environment in Uganda. So I would rather really celebrate the work of the coalition, the work of the LGBT organizations, who, despite that volatile and dangerous environment that the bill had created, were able to begin their work. I think about over 50 new LGBT organizations came up from when the bill was introduced in 2009 to 2014, when the president asserted it into law. It speaks a lot to the resilience of the community. It speaks a lot to kind of the sustainability of activism within this country. It was we had a law that was supposed to stop organizing, that was supposed to put activists like myself into jail. Now, I was supposed to kind of end the discussion around homosexuality and send all of us to jail, but instead there was a movement that arose within that period of time to fight what was a common, it was a common fight, because this law was not just going to affect LGBT individuals or LGBT organizations. It was going to affect everyone. Everyone in this country would have been affected by this law. Because if you're telling people that, if you have a clause in the bill that is saying that individuals who don't report suspected LGBT individuals will be liable, you're giving blackmailers, you're giving, individuals that want a reason to punish anyone else an opportunity to report someone else as gay, even if they're not, you know. So it was going to affect all of us and the rest of the majority who say they identify as heterosexual. So it was a bill, it was a law that was not just targeting LGBT individuals, but really every Ugandan. Before 2009, I wouldn't say I was an activist, really. I just finished school a few years before. And in 2009, I was actually interning at Parliament. So when the bill was introduced, again, not just that it was personal for me, like my member of Parliament was the one tabling this bill, but I had a lot of kind of anger. So while I was scared of the idea of being a visible LGBT activist or activist of any kind, really, I was also aware that this bill, whether you're a silent LGBT individual, whether you're in the closet, you know, whether you're open, we're all going to be affected by this law. So the choice to remain silent or not silent, like there wasn't kind of like a reason to say, if I remain silent, I will be safe. You know, you are going to be affected whether you're silent or not. So I wouldn't consider myself to be an activist before 2009. But I think in the very fact that your life, your rights are being legislated against, in one way or another, you become an activist, you know, and perhaps that form of activism can take the can be in the sense that you refuse to deny who you are, right? Or that you continue to love your partner, you continue to love your community, you continue to refuse to be put back in the closet under such a restrictive legal regime. I find, you know, that's activism. The refusal to be put back into a closet, the refusal to deny who you are, the refusal to apologize for who you are. So in the sense, I think I was doing all that. I was refusing to conform because I realized that conformity benefited everyone but me. Okay. I was continuing to love my then girlfriend, right? I refused the fear and this legislative repressive environment to deny me that right to love the person that I loved at that point. I wasn't like a political activist, but I was an activist in that sense. The refusal to deny who I am, the refusal to conform, and the refusal to remain silent. So after the law was signed by the president, there was, I think I would like to first say that we had anticipated, you know, we had been talking about the consequences of this law. Okay, so Parliament, the president were aware, okay, they were aware of the consequences of this law. And so was the community. We tried as much as possible to help the community understand the consequences of this law. Okay, both legally, socially, environmentally. And yes, indeed, after the law was passed, I do remember that there was a lot of, there was that feeling of failure, like we had failed the community, that we had failed to stop a law that would have such overarching effects on the community from not being passed, you know, so we had failed. I felt that failure. But at the same time, I was aware that there was so much fear. It was almost palpable. There was so much fear within the community. There was a lot of panic, what they call gay panic. You know, LGBT individuals were panicking, and for good reason. Just for identifying as an LGBT individual, you'd be sent to jail for life. Like, who wouldn't panic under such an environment? You know, that it would seem the legislative arm of government and the executive arm of government had turned against us, had turned against a community that had done nothing wrong, but was simply a pawn in a larger context of power fights, which I'll not get into. But yes, so there was a lot of fear and panic. I remember individuals started to escape the country. You know, it's like people were escaping the country to go to and seek asylum. I know that the community was very scattered. You know, we're all scattered. You're either hiding in your house or in your room. You're either somewhere crying with your lover, or if you're lucky, you were able to run back home for that protection. But there was that feeling of scatteredness. People were scattered. You know, you would go to a place where no, people did not dare to go to any social gathering where other LGBT individuals, known or in the closet, were. And I remember that most of organizations closed their doors, obviously, for obvious reasons, because LGBT organizations were going to be not just shut down, but the leadership, the staff would have been arrested for promoting homosexuality, as the law prescribed. I also remember that the outing in the media started in earnest. You know, they had been outing us for a long time, but in essence, the government and the legislative arm of government had said, "No, here is your legal paper to actualize homophobia, right? To actualize, you know, to actualize homophobia, to out individuals." So the media were like, "Okay, we have this law, so here are the people. Here are the people you need to arrest and put in jail," right? So there was such a dark cloud of outing that would then put individuals, whether they were out or not, in grave danger of abuse from society. I also know there was an increase in violations from so your neighbor, you know, your neighbor would who was perhaps a bit progressive before was no longer progressive, because the law prescribed that if they didn't report you, right, then you'd be liable. So there was an increase of violations and persecutions within community. People were beaten up more, and what else happened? There was also, I remember there's one incident that will never leave me. So a gay man, perhaps maybe 20 years old, called me just after the president signed the bill into law. And he told me, "Claire, give me at least 2 reasons why I shouldn't commit suicide. Like, if this law is supposed to basically wipe us off the, you know, I think he used the word planet Earth or something. Like, if they're going to arrest us anyway, like, why should I continue living?" And again, as an activist, I realized, or as an individual, as Claire, I realized this question was reflective of so many other LGBT individuals within the country. If you're living in such an oppressive environment that then legalizes hate, that legalizes homophobia, transphobia, lesphobia, all the phobias in relation to who you are, in relation to your life, there's that feeling of it affects your mental health. Okay. And I did tell him, I remember telling him, don't worry, like, we're going to fight this, right? Because as activists, as a coalition, we did not just have one strategy. We were not just fighting in Parliament. Okay, we had other strategies to ensure that the community, that to an extent, we would not be wiped off the face of the earth. So I was able to assure him, don't worry about it. We're going to take care of this. We have lost this fight, at a Parliament level, but we have other strategies and we'll get rid of this law. I was very confident because all the organizations within the coalition, the HIV and AIDS activists, individuals that were working within the women's movement and organizations as well, and people from academia. It was such a diverse group of both individuals and organizations that had come together for different reasons to fight the anti-gay law. So I knew if we failed with a legislative angle, we had other strategies that would make this bill go away, because first of all, it would have been, the law itself was very difficult to implement. Like, how are you going to determine that people are LGBT? Like, we don't walk around with labels on our heads. Was Uganda going to employ a group to start peeping in people's windows, find out if they are practicing homosexuality, right? It was such a difficult difficult law to implement anyway. So we knew, we did know it was very difficult to implement, but it was largely, it was against any form of human rights that you've ever heard about, right? It was against all the articles within Chapter 4 of the Constitution. So we knew at a legal level we would fight and we would win. Yeah, so we knew we would win, and I assured this young man, and thankfully he didn't go ahead with his thinking to end his life because of the repressive environment. So after the law was passed, I know that a number of LGBT organizations, particularly Sexual Minorities Uganda, was able to do kind of a survey or a case study of the after effects of the law. So I don't have the statistics. I know that there was a report that was published. I can't remember what it was called, but I know SMAG has a report that has all those statistics. In 2013, 2014, I know these were, like dark years. Let's say from 2009, they were dark years for the LGBT community, for activists that were trying to fight this anti-gay law. And after the law was repealed by the Constitutional Court, which is largely because of the constitutional petition that the coalition and the partners were able to quickly petition the Constitutional Court to have this law declared unconstitutional for contravening all the rights under Chapter 4 of the Constitution. So we were able to quickly go to court, and we did a lot of background work, again, to ensure that the government understood that there's consequences to taking away rights of citizens, of individuals, even if they belong to a minority, right? So there was a lot of background work, both legally, but also at an international level, at international and regional level within the African Commission, African Union. So after we had petition court, we understood that even if this law was repealed, and indeed it was repealed, like I said before, very quickly, I have not heard of any other law that enjoyed as much support, as much hate, as much attention as the anti-homosexuality law of 2014 enjoyed being repealed so quickly. It's unprecedented. And I will credit again the coalition, the organizations that were within the coalition, our international partners, even the minority of some MPs that were that focused on the promotion of human rights and not demonizing and punishment of LGBT individuals who were innocent. So in that sense, with a bill that, or law that was enjoying such popularity, for it to be repealed or even heard by the Constitutional Court so quickly was unprecedented. So unfortunately, what happened in court is that the judges, for whatever reasons, well, the obvious reasons, they feared backlash. Right? They feared backlash. So what they did was to declare the law unconstitutional, or to repeal the law on a technicality. So what they said was that the law had been passed, or the bill had been passed into law by MPs without quorum. Okay. So my understanding is that for a law to be passed legally, there has to be at least 2/3 of members of parliament in parliament that day. But on that day, there were not 2/3 of members of parliament. So the Constitutional Court really failed to deal with the substantive arguments in our petition, which was that the law was contravening all the human rights that are guaranteed by the Constitution of Uganda for all Ugandans, right? So they basically picked a technical reason to have the law repealed, but we move with what we can get, right? The fact is that the law was repealed and it was no longer on the books, right? But what happened was that MPs were like, oh, it's because we didn't have. Is it because we didn't have we didn't have quorum in parliament? No problem. We can easily get a sitting quickly and pass this law again, if that is the issue, if that is what court is saying. So they tried to do that, right? They tried to get themselves together and have the law retabled and passed quickly, right? But I know that the president then called the NRM caucus, who enjoys the majority in parliament, and told them we need to go slow on this bill, right? I don't remember the exact, I think he used the word, he used a certain saying in, I think in Runyankole or in Luganda, something about a snake and a pot. When you're breaking, when you want to kill a snake and you instead destroy the pot, something like that. So in essence, he was telling them, we need to go slow. We suffered backlash as a result of passing this law. So in other words, we need to pick our battles. Are we going to enjoy more unpopularity, more backlash from the international community, and at a national level, those who are proponents of human rights? Or do we need to be smart and go slow? He basically called on MPs to be slow, and thankfully, any attempts to retable this law were put to an end. But that means it left a gap. Okay, MPs from the 8th Parliament, 9th Parliament have always felt like we need this bill back, right? The conversations around this bill have never gone away. You know, the religious leaders, all the anti-gay proponents have been lobbying and advocating for this law to come back for various reasons, whether it's for political leverage, whether it is for a religion or religious denominations that don't enjoy popularity anymore, right? For whatever reasons that the anti-gay proponents want this law to be back, those reasons still stand. So what we are seeing now is a replica of what was happening before the law was tabled. You know, the misleading, false allegations that LGBT activists or whoever is recruitment in school, that has never been proven. It's not true, but they use the same rhetoric. It's the same rhetoric that they were using, the anti-gay proponents were using before the law was tabled. You know, it's the same. It's the same discussions in the media. It's the same discussions in Parliament. You know, the speaker, the way Taebwa is speaking now as a deputy speaker, is the same way Kadaga and I don't know, was a deputy speaker. It's the same rhetoric. It's the same kind of structure of how they usually make this happen. They cause panic within the society, and by falsely alleging that LGBT individuals are recruiting children, that we are promoting homosexuality, and yet I truly believe they're the ones promoting. We don't even have to argue about it. As LGBT activists, as advocates, we don't have the same spaces that the anti-gay proponents have. So if you're talking about homosexuality every day, even if it's not in an objective way, even if you're telling lies and spreading falsehoods, you're still making people talk about something that is private, that should be private. Okay, that should be private. So the appetite for this law has never gone away. The appetite for all the benefits that anti-gay proponents get when this law is being debated have never gone away, right? People are looking for relevance, and unfortunately, they always pick on the LGBT community. But I would like to think that they have learned their lessons. Okay, they've learned the lessons that while even if we are a minority group, even if we don't know how many numbers, even if we don't know how many Ugandans we are as self-identified LGBTI individuals, we have powerful, very, very powerful national and international allies that will fight with us. And we kind of, let's call them lived experiences. We have fought this law before. We've seen the trajectory of this anti-gay proponents campaigns. Like, we've seen it before. So while there is still the same feelings of fear and panic and a sense of unfairness and the effects on the mental health within the LGBT community, for obvious reasons, if you're being talked about every day, every single day in such a subjective and dangerous way, of course, it has an effect on you. But I would like to think that we've been through it before, and we continue to go through it. So I would like to think that we'll be ready to fight the anti-gay law if it is eventually tabled, of which I'm not too sure, considering the remarks or the 2014 and the consequences of the law being passed. I would like to think that the government or the legislature or MPs would not like to have the consequences of taking away or seeking to take away rights of individuals that exist in the Constitution. So there's real consequences to picking on a community that has done nothing wrong, right? Like I said, the appetite has never gone away for this law, and it will probably continue. But I think that's why the LGBT movement, where it is in a good positioning to fight. I mean, I'm against the community always being resilient. You know, like as an LGBT community, we should be able to also relax, you know, enjoy livelihood, enjoy the same human rights that the rest of the country enjoys, or the rest of the citizenry enjoys in varying levels, right? We should be able to enjoy those same human rights and live free, and to live without, you know, harassment and hate, right? We should not always be resilient, you know, getting ready for a fight. So, you know, that's no way to live. Like, it's like, I understand that we're always on guard, and I understand that we kind of always on tension, because anything can happen. You know, whatever gains or wins you have could easily be taken away. So as a mindfulness and meditation teacher as well, I'm against always being resilient. Like we all deserve to be happy, hopeful, to live in peace, and to enjoy our livelihood.